That iconic red Cartier box sits on your vanity, its golden embossed lettering catching the light as you lift the lid to reveal a gleaming piece of jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. The satisfaction of wearing something so expensive that strangers stop mid-conversation to stare. This is the Cartier experience that has seduced royalty for over a century. Yet behind that legendary red packaging lies one of history's most dramatic family sagas, where three brothers conquered the world through sheer audacity and perfect timing, only to watch their descendants surrender everything without a fight. The metalworker's son who founded this empire built something that was supposed to last forever, creating jewelry so magnificent that owning it meant joining an exclusive club where regular millionaires couldn't even apply for membership. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we explore how the Cartier family created the ultimate luxury empire, and then lost it all to their own success. In the drawing rooms of European palaces and Manhattan penthouses, one name carried more weight than royal titles: Cartier. This was the family that built a $4 billion empire from scratch, their workshops creating the jewelry that crowned kings and adorned empresses. King Edward VII himself called them the jeweller of kings and the king of jewelers, a title that opened every palace door from London to St. Petersburg. Their most spectacular creation was the Patiala necklace, commissioned in 1925 by the Maharaja of Patiala for 1 billion rupees, worth $2.5 billion today. Princess Mathilde wore their sapphires, Empress Eugénie collected their platinum pieces, and Grace Kelly swept through Monaco dripping in their emeralds. Elizabeth Taylor's legendary appetite for luxury found its perfect match in Cartier's creations, while the Duke of Windsor trusted them with pieces fit for a king. Pierre Cartier pulled off the deal of the century when he traded a pearl necklace worth $1 million for a 6-story mansion on Fifth Avenue. Their London workshop worked around the clock to create 27 tiaras for King Edward's coronation in 1902, each piece a masterwork. Louis Cartier revolutionized jewelry by pioneering the use of platinum, while his tank watch became the timepiece that every powerful person had to own. Jacques Cartier disappeared into the jungles of India and emerged with rubies the size of eggs and emeralds that captured light like bottled fire. Their mystery-setting technique seemed to defy physics, making precious stones appear to float in midair without any visible supports. The three brothers had divided up the world like generals planning a campaign. Louis conquered Europe from Paris, Pierre dominated America, and Jacques ruled the British Empire from London. By 2020, the Cartier brand was worth $12.2 billion and generated $6.2 billion in annual revenue from over 200 stores worldwide. European duchesses, Indian maharajas, Russian aristocrats fleeing revolution, American tycoons, and Hollywood stars all worshipped at the Cartier altar. Their workshops housed craftsmen who practiced techniques passed down through generations, creating pieces that would survive wars, revolutions, and the collapse of entire civilizations. Owning Cartier wasn't just about having expensive jewelry. It was about joining an exclusive club where membership required more money than most countries possessed. The Cartier name had become synonymous with a level of luxury so extreme that regular millionaires couldn't even get through the front door. Their clients didn't just buy jewelry, they bought immortality, knowing that Cartier pieces would outlast their owners and their great-great-grandchildren. The family had achieved something remarkable. They had created a business that was bigger than any individual family member and more enduring than empires. Yet beneath all this success, something was already going wrong. The very wealth that had elevated them above ordinary people was about to destroy everything. The children and grandchildren who inherited this empire would prove that sometimes the greatest threat to a dynasty comes from within its own walls. Louis-François Cartier was born in 1819 Paris, where being poor meant staying poor and dreaming big was considered a waste of time. His father worked as a metalworker, coming home every night with hands stained black from crafting ordinary objects for people who paid in copper coins. His mother scrubbed the expensive clothes of rich women while her own family wore rags that had been patched so many times they looked like a crazy quilt. They lived in a tiny apartment that smelled like factory smoke and desperation, where every meal was a gamble and every winter threatened to be their last. But even as a kid, Louis-François had different eyes. He stared at beautiful things with the intensity of someone planning a heist. While other boys played with sticks and stones, he studied how light moved through glass and how metal could be shaped into something that made people gasp. His big break came when he apprenticed under Adolphe Picard, whose workshop on Rue Montorgueil was where rough stones became objects that wealthy women would kill to own. Picard's workshop was brutal. Apprentices bled over their work, and masters accepted nothing less than perfection that bordered on the impossible. The old man saw something special in Louis-François, a hunger that went beyond wanting nice things to actually understanding what made them powerful. Learning jewelry wasn't just about pretty baubles, it was about creating weapons of seduction that could conquer hearts and destroy enemies. When 1847 rolled around, Louis-François faced the moment that would either make him rich or leave him broke in a gutter somewhere. Picard offered to sell him the workshop, but it would cost every franc Louis-François had saved through years of living like a monk. This wasn't just buying a business, it was betting his entire future on his ability to turn stones and metal into gold. Smart enough to know that location determined everything in Paris, Louis-François moved to Place du Palais Royal in 1853, getting closer to where the money lived. By 1859, he had opened a boutique on Boulevard des Italiens during Napoleon III's reign, positioning himself where the emperor's crowd shopped. The game-changing moment came in 1856 when Princess Mathilde, the emperor's own cousin, brought him a broken necklace that other jewelers said couldn't be fixed. Louis-François treated that necklace like it was made of dynamite, knowing that success would open every important door in Paris while failure would end his dreams forever. When Princess Mathilde told her friends about the amazing work he had done, it spread through aristocratic circles like wildfire. Suddenly, the metalworker's son was getting commissions from empresses and duchesses who had never spoken to a commoner in their lives. In 1874, Louis-François handed the business over to his son Alfred, passing down something much bigger than a jewelry store. He had built a platform for greatness, a foundation that would soon support an empire spanning continents and commanding the loyalty of kings. Alfred Cartier raised 3 sons who turned out to be the perfect team for world domination, each brother bringing exactly what the family needed to conquer different continents. Louis was born in 1875 with an artist's brain and a businessman's ruthlessness, capable of designing jewelry that made grown women weep with desire. Pierre arrived in 1878 with the instincts of a born deal-maker who understood that in America, making noise mattered more than having noble blood. Jacques entered the world in 1884, destined to become an adventurer who would travel to dangerous places and come back with treasures that belonged in fairy tales. According to family stories told by their descendant, Francesca Cartier-Brickell, the 3 boys once sat around a world map and literally divided up the planet like they were playing a board game. They made a pact that sounded crazy, but turned out to be genius: create the greatest jewelry company in history, with Louis taking Europe, Pierre conquering America, and Jacques claiming the British Empire. Louis set up his headquarters on Rue de la Paix in 1899, turning the location into a pilgrimage site for every European aristocrat who wanted to own something extraordinary. He revolutionized the industry by figuring out how to work with platinum and created the tank watch, which became the timepiece that every important person had to have. Louis also invented mystery clocks that seemed to tell time by magic, with no visible mechanism holding the hands, a technical achievement that left competitors scratching their heads. Pierre launched his American invasion in 1909, immediately targeting the biggest names in the country: the Astors, Vanderbilts, and Rockefellers. His masterpiece was trading a pearl necklace for a Manhattan mansion, securing prime real estate on Fifth Avenue through sheer audacity and perfect timing. Pierre understood that Americans loved scandal and spectacle, which is why he bought the cursed Hope Diamond, knowing the newspaper coverage would be worth millions in free advertising. Jacques opened his London operation in 1902, timing it perfectly with King Edward's coronation, when everyone needed ceremonial jewellery for the biggest party in British history. He made dangerous trips to India, charming Maharajas into showing him their treasure rooms filled with rubies and emeralds that had been collected over centuries. These expeditions inspired his tutti frutti jewellery collection, pieces that captured the exotic beauty of Eastern design while appealing to European tastes. Jacques' connections with Indian royalty gave him access to gemstones so incredible that other jewellers could only dream about getting their hands on similar materials. The strategy paid off immediately when King Edward VII gave them an official royal warrant in 1904, basically announcing to the world that Cartier was the jewellery company of choice for royalty. Royal courts across Europe followed England's lead, with Spain, Portugal, Serbia, Russia and France all giving Cartier their official stamp of approval. The brothers proved they could adapt to anything by shifting their focus whenever political chaos moved wealth from one group to another. When the Russian Revolution wiped out their aristocratic Russian customers, they pivoted to American millionaires without missing a beat. When the Great Depression hit America, they focused on Indian Maharajas and later on oil-rich Middle Eastern clients who had money to burn. Their business model was brilliant in its simplicity. Follow the money wherever it goes and always be ready to serve whoever has the most of it. Death hit the Cartier dynasty like a 1-2 punch, taking out Jacques in 1941 at 58 and following up with Louis just months later in July 1942 at 67. These back-to-back losses gutted an empire that had been built around the irreplaceable combination of three very different but perfectly complementary brothers. The company had been designed like a three-legged stool, and now Pierre was left trying to balance the whole thing on one leg while watching everything they had built start to wobble. Pierre suddenly found himself running global operations alone during World War II, trying to maintain businesses across multiple continents while bombs were falling and governments were collapsing. The deaths marked more than just personal tragedy. They started a slow-motion collapse that would eventually destroy everything the family had spent decades building. The fourth generation inherited massive wealth without understanding the brutal work that had created it, treating their inheritance like a trust fund rather than a living business. These kids had grown up rich and comfortable, never knowing what it felt like to be hungry enough to work 18-hour days or desperate enough to risk everything on a single deal. As family historian Francesca Cartier-Brickell would later discover, by the time Pierre died in 1964, the family had become scattered and completely uninterested in running the business. The descendants had gotten really good at marrying rich people and making smart investments, but they had zero interest in the daily grind of actually managing a global jewellery empire. They preferred spending their winters bobsledding in St. Moritz to hawking tank watches, choosing lifestyle over legacy and comfort over the kind of obsessive dedication that had built their fortune. This shift revealed the classic problem with inherited wealth. The qualities that create empires, hunger, obsession, and willingness to sacrifice everything, rarely get passed down to kids who never had to fight for anything. The business had been built around the assumption that family members would always prioritize the company above their personal comfort. But the fourth generation saw Cartier as a source of income. Geographic distance started breaking apart the unified vision that had made global expansion possible, as the different branches began operating like separate companies rather than parts of a single empire. New York followed American business practices, London operated according to British traditions, and Paris maintained European approaches, creating confusion where there had once been crystal-clear coordination. These differences had been manageable when the brothers were alive and talking to each other constantly, but now they created inefficiency and conflict as family members pursued their own interests. The luxury business itself was changing around them, requiring bigger capital investments and more sophisticated management than traditional family companies could easily handle. Professional competitors with access to serious money and modern management techniques started circling like sharks, sensing weakness in the increasingly fragmented Cartier operations. The family faced a choice that would determine whether they survived or became just another cautionary tale about dynasties that couldn't adapt to changing times. The 1960s and 70s brought massive changes to luxury retail, demanding the kind of capital and expertise that even successful family businesses struggled to provide. Many family members had become wealthy through strategic marriages and inherited investments, their prosperity completely disconnected from the actual work of making and selling jewelry. Some relatives showed more enthusiasm for their personal hobbies and social lives than for the demanding work of maintaining global operations across multiple time zones and cultures. The poison was already in the system, and the symptoms were about to become impossible to ignore. Pierre Cartier's death in 1964 was like pulling the keystone out of an arch. Suddenly, everything the family had built for over a century started crumbling. The remaining heirs faced a choice that would have horrified their ancestors: keep fighting to maintain family control or cash out and let someone else deal with the headaches. Claude Cartier fired the first shot in what became a complete family retreat, selling the New York operations in 1962 before Pierre had even died. Historical records show that Claude simply didn't have the drive or ambition that had made his relatives famous, treating his inheritance like unwanted baggage instead of a family treasure. His decision to sell wasn't just a business transaction. It was the first crack in a dam that would soon burst and wash away everything the family had built. Marion Cartier-Claudel and Jean-Jacques Cartier found themselves trying to run pieces of an empire that no longer worked together the way it had when the brothers were alive. The cousins couldn't agree on what Cartier should become, each having different ideas about the future that made it impossible to create any kind of unified strategy. Jean-Jacques Cartier, who ended up being the last family member to actually run part of the business, clearly hated the idea of selling but couldn't see any other realistic option. He understood what was being lost when his generation decided to give up, but the practical realities of running a global luxury business had become too complicated for a fractured family. The Paris headquarters fell in 1972 when Robert Hock and his investors bought it for $12,800,000, a fraction of what the business was actually worth. London was sold in 1974, and the final piece disappeared in 1976 when Cartier New York went to the same group that had already swallowed up the other branches. By 1979, all three branches had been reunited under something called Cartier Monde, but the founding family had been completely eliminated from the company that still carried their name. This marked the end of 117 years of family ownership, during which time a metalworker's son had built a global empire only to watch his great-grandchildren sell it off like old furniture. The irony was brutal. Under professional management, Cartier became more successful than it had ever been when the family was running it. The Swiss Richemont Group took over and proved that corporate efficiency could maintain luxury prestige while expanding globally beyond anything the original family had ever achieved. By 2020, Forbes ranked Cartier as the 56th most valuable brand in the world, worth $12.2 billion and generating $6.2 billion in annual revenue. The company now operates over 200 stores in 125 countries, creating wealth that makes the original family fortune look like pocket change. Elle Pagels, Pierre Cartier's granddaughter, maintains some connection to the business through her work with Richemont, representing the last remaining link between the bloodline and their former empire. Francesca Cartier-Brickell found a trunk full of family letters in her grandfather Jean-Jacques' wine cellar and used them to write the definitive book about how her family built and then lost everything. Her research preserves the story of three brothers who conquered the world only to have their descendants surrender it without even putting up a fight. The Cartier name still represents the absolute peak of luxury and craftsmanship, but now it serves as a monument to a family that had everything and threw it all away. Their story stands as the ultimate warning about what happens when people inherit empires they never had to build. Sometimes the greatest enemy of a dynasty isn't external competition, but internal indifference. With that said, we'd love to see you in the comments. Have you ever owned a piece of Cartier jewelry, or would you like to? We look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Old Money Luxury. And we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.